Hello, everybody, and welcome into the very first episode of the Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show. If you didn't see me on Twitter the other day, I put out a poll that's not a poll. I put out a tweet that basically said if I were to start a fantasy football show and launch it under the Around the Slice brand, would you guys be interested in that? Meaning the general public and audience. And it seemed to get pretty good reception, that tweet. So I decided to go ahead and do it. So this is how this is going to work. Whether you know me from my other show, welcome back, or you know me just from this show, welcome in for the very first time. I have my regular Around the Slice show, which is basically focused on Bills football game previews, game recaps during the season, all things Buffalo Bills. But I wanted to kind of expand my horizons, if you will, and expand the Around the Slice brand. So I will be launching on Apple Podcasts and other podcast platforms the Around the Slice Podcast Network, which is going to be my quote-unquote home to the Around the Slice Bills show, the primary show. And then this is a secondary podcast, but the second new one I'm starting, the Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show. I'm really passionate about fantasy football. I've been playing it for 5 or 6 years now. It's awesome. Like, I love the research. I love the stats that go into it. I want to shout out a couple podcasts that are not special to me per se, but that have really encouraged me to do my own content in the fantasy football space. And just there's a lot of people in the fantasy football space that I look up to that I want to shout out. So first, I want to shout out Fantasy Pros. They have a website, but mainly their podcasts are very informative, very well put together. And then recently, I just started getting into Football Guys, their podcasts and shows, with the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show with Alfredo Brown and those guys over there. So that's who I wanted to give a quick shout out to. I'm sure I'm missing a ton, but those are my two main shows, Fantasy Pros, and then I recently got into Football Guys Fantasy Football Show with, once again, Alfredo Brown. So anyway, and all those guys were there. So anyway, without further ado, what will my show, again, the Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show here, be in particular? Well, it's going to be a weekly show, just like my other primary Around the Slice Bills show. It's not going to be like a set date like this Monday or Tuesday. Once we get in the season, it will probably be more structured. But since it's the summer, I'm trying to hammer out and finish out the summer schedule, if you will. It's just going to be anytime during the week, but I promise you it will be weekly. We're going to go over must-have players, which is going to be our topic today, which is going to be fun. Overvalued players, undervalued players, risky players in the offseason, get you ready for drafts and to win your league. And then during the season, it's full go from there on up. We're going to have waiver wire advice, sit show advice, everything like that. I'll take your questions and everything like that. Leave comments here on if you're watching on YouTube. Or if you're listening on the audio platforms, I appreciate that as well. But you can go over to the YouTube and listen to that, watch that right away, leave a comment. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get into my must-have players. I got a handful of them, 14 to be exact. My must-have players for 2024 fantasy football year this season. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys, yeah, Christian McCaffrey is number one on my must-have players. Okay, duh. That's boring content. He's the 101. Which means he's the first overall pick in 9 out of 10 leagues. In 99% of leagues, you guys will be in, including my own leagues. But these are players, some more obvious than others. A couple deep sleepers in here. One really, really deep sleeper. I don't want to spoil it. We'll get into that, but it's really exciting, deep sleeper. So yeah, I have 14 players here, so that I want to come out of drafts, which is my 10 or 11 league. It's getting chaotic at this point with 10 or 11 leagues, like I just said. But I want to come out of drafts. Maybe not every single one of those players, but a lot of these players I want to come up with shares with of drafts. So, and I'm willing to pay the high cost in some of them. So let's get into it. These are in no particular order, no priority. It's just a handful of 14 players. So my first must-have player for this upcoming season, in no particular order, is Dalton Kincaid. I will provide ADP, which is average draft position. So Bills, tight end, Dalton Kincaid with an ADP of tight end 5 off the board. When I saw that, I'm assuming the 4 tight ends drafted above him are being Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, and probably Sam Laporta. Maybe Trey McBride's in there as well instead of George Kittle. But you get the point. If this price stays like this, then I will be taking a lot of shares of Dalton Kincaid. I will be taking last year's Dalton Kincaid because I'm a Bills fan, obviously. My primary show is about the Bills, so I'm very in tune with this stuff around the team. He's basically like a big slot. With Joe Brady coming in, there's no more Stephon Diggs. There's no more guy to soak up the targets other than Dalton Kincaid. Yeah, Keon Coleman, second round pick. Yeah, Curtis Samuel, decently big free agency signing. Yeah, Khalil Shakir ready to explode in year 3. But those, I don't want to say they're Jags. They're just guys. But it's a more spread out approach. So the target funneler, if you will, Josh Allen will seemingly funnel the targets to Dalton Kincaid. I won't be surprised, I don't think, if this ADP rises by the time we get to drafts at the end of August from tight end 5, like it is now, to 3 or 4. I think there's a very solid case and solid argument that Dalton Kincaid could finish as the tight end 1 overall in fantasy football over Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta. So if this, I don't say this is a discount, but if this ADP stays at tight end 5, I'm all in. I am all in on this. And I think there's even more to be unlocked here because last year Dalton Kincaid didn't really get going until Dawson Knox was hurt, until Joe Brady kind of took over. Yeah, before it was a mess with Ken Dorsey, but it's near nor there. It's for the Bills, Round the Slice Bill show. But yeah, I think there's more to be unlocked here. I could see, like, at the end of the year, Dalton Kincaid finishes this the tight end 1 overall. But again, I don't think this ADP will stay at tight end 5, and that's okay. If it rises to tight end 3, tight end 4, I don't think it'll be top 2. I think Kelce and Laporta / Andrews will always be ahead of him. But let's just say it does stay at tight end 5. That's an extremely big discount. Like, well, maybe not extremely big because that's still a top 5 tight end price. But I'm willing to take Dalton Kincaid in the 3rd, 4th round if he's still there. So that's just amazing to me. Next, this is kind of a bigger, quote unquote, bigger fish, if you will. Jets running back Breece Hall. His ADP is RB2, only behind Christian McCaffrey. I am perfectly fine with that. Now you can nitpick and say Christian McCaffrey's obviously RB1 and he should be a tier in on his own, onto himself, but tier on himself rather. Excuse me, but you can say Bijan should be turned to over Breece Hall because Bijan Robinson hasn't torn his ACL in his career. But on the other side of it, Breece Hall didn't have to deal with Arthur Smith. But now that Raheem Morris said, this isn't about Bijan, I'm getting off topic, but Breece Hall is a must-have for me because I'm going to go nuclear. Yes, Delvin Cook didn't do much last year, but there's literally no running mate for him in the backfield, no competition. And I people haven't talked about this enough in real football, but more importantly for fantasy purposes, to support Garrett Wilson and some of the weapons there. Aaron Rodgers, like, are we assuming that coming off of a torn Achilles at 40 years old, going on 41 in December, that he's going to be okay? Like, perfectly fine? Like, a quarterback that has zero mobility to begin with, and especially now not even close, like, it kind of concerns me. I don't feel like this is a big enough talking point. If you were to guarantee me 17 games of health for Aaron Rodgers, there's no bumps or bruises or anything like that, then Garrett Wilson, for example, would easily 1,000% be in this must-have list. But he's not. And by the way, I don't really care about Allen Lazard. He's just a jag, just a guy in the fantasy space, as it's known. And then Mike Williams, yeah, big body target downfield, but it's unfortunate, but he's as injury prone as they come. The guy tears his ACL every year, it seems like, so for the past 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, Breece Hall, all wheels up for Breece Hall. It just no competition in the backfield. And like I said, Garrett Wilson would easily be on here 1,000%. I don't want to go on a soapbox about Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson, but I don't think people are talking about it enough coming off of a torn Achilles at 40 years old. And he says he wants to play this past this year, but in redraft leagues, well, it doesn't matter because this is redraft, not dynasty. But for dynasty especially, that's whatever. But for redraft, are we sure that we're just airdropping Aaron Rodgers back in this offense? It's all cool and calm and everything is good there. I think Breece Hall is going to get a massive, massive workload. Another year, so basically 2 years removed from his torn ACL. He suffered as a rookie. Going into year 3, I legit think he could lead the NFL in pure rushing because Christian McCaffrey is basically a slot receiver and a running back body, or however you want to say that. So, yeah, I don't think. But RB2, I am perfectly fine with this. Obviously, he's never going to get the RB1 because of Christian McCaffrey. But this, like Breece Hall, for sure, middle of the first round pick, I'm all in. That's why he's a must-have player for me. Next, Ravens running back Derrick Henry. His ADP right now is RB be 10. That is perfectly fine. I think you can make a case for Derrick Henry over. Now, I haven't made my specific rankings for this show yet. Once I release those, I'll release those and get those to you guys ASAP immediately. But I can make a case, real case, that Derrick Henry should be valued and taken in 80, at least in terms of ADP and ECR, over Jonathan Taylor, over Jahmyr Gibbs, and I love those two. Because Derrick Henry, I mean, he's going to get all the goal line work plus more. And I think I'll mention Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor later. Little spoiler alert, they're on my must-have players, but I won't dive into them now. Because I'm talking about Derrick Henry. If Gus Edwards can get, 12, 15, 13 rushing touchdowns this year, I'm pretty sure Derrick Henry can get 15 plus. Now, I don't bet, but 10 plus touchdowns is free money, and the market hasn't really swayed on that. So, I think like Derrick Henry will be 30 this year, but like he's just not, to use like that cliche, built different term, but he is just built different. Like, what if he's just not human? That might be hyperbole, but seriously, like he does not break down. People say when running backs turn 29, 30, like Alvin Kamara, almost 30, Dalvin Cook, almost 30, was total dust last year, clouded dust last year. Derrick Henry, he just doesn't ever slow down. And with Lamar Jackson in the backfield, the read options will help. You don't know if you're a linebacker, do you stack the box against Derrick Henry? Well, if you stack the box, Lamar will just play action and go outside zone sweep. And then if you defend the edges for Lamar, they give it to Derrick Henry right up the middle, and that's how he gets the 15 plus touchdowns. I will not be surprised if we look up at the end of the year and Derrick Henry is a top 5 running back. I know people say, well, Lamar Jackson's going to take away some of those rushing touchdowns. Well, Lamar Jackson's going to take rushing this, rushing that. Guys, Lamar Jackson went down from like 220 pounds to 205 pounds this offseason. He's 205 pounds right now. They do not want to slam him into the goal line now more than ever because of that weight. Yes, he'll be more fast and shifty, but Derrick Henry's like 50, like almost pretty much 40 pounds heavier. He's like 245 and Lamar's like 205. I mean, come on. They're not going to slam a 205 quarterback when they have a 245-pound running back, his actual position, into the goal line. Lamar, I feel like, is not going to get goal line carries. Probably not. So we can look up at the end of the year. Oh, yeah, Derrick Henry, I'm almost 30, but he finished at the top 5 RB at the end of the year when it's all said and done. I'm totally in on Derrick Henry for fantasy this year, 2024 fantasy football. And what I keep going back to is if Gus Edwards can get 13 rushing touchdowns last year, like Derrick Henry is miles better, like not even the same stratosphere than Gus Edwards, like, okay, yeah. And like I said, I don't think they want to, I know they don't want to slam Lamar into the goal line even with his weight loss now. Next must-have player for this year in 2024 fantasy football, Texas QB CJ Stroud. His ADP right now is QB5. Now listen, I would slightly prefer Anthony Richardson over him. And I'm not saying CJ Stroud is a total of 0. He's sneaky athletic in the running game and mobile, but he just doesn't use it. So, but my main point here is instead of trying to parse out the ADPs and ECRs for Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon, mainly Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell, instead of saying which one do I want for DFS, Daily Fantasy Sports, or which one do I want for fantasy every week, instead of trying to parse through who's who here and who I want, I just want a lot of shares of CJ Stroud. Like, all 3 could be very viable weapons. All 3, I don't think Tank Dell might not hit 1,000 yards, but Tank Dell's the cheapest right now. Nico Collins the most expensive, and then Stephon Diggs kind of in the middle. Instead of trying to figure out who will outperform who I want and parse through that, like I just mentioned, I think I want CJ Stroud. Like, you know, if he has all these weapons, I want CJ Stroud. I just want exposure, as much exposure to this Texas offense as I can. And whether I'm trying to debate which weapon I want on a week-to-week basis, or even at the end of August in draft season, I want the quarterbacks that's going to be funneling those targets. QB quarterback that's going to be funneling those targets to those guys, empowering that high-powered offense under DeMeco Ryans. So, yeah, this is kind of just CJ Stroud. I don't know what to say. And then 2 Colts teammates here. We got Colts QB Anthony Richardson and then Colts running back Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to start with Anthony Richardson, who has an ADP right now of QB6, I'm not predicting it per se. Will I be absolutely shocked if we look up at the end of the year and Anthony Richardson finished as the QB1 in fantasy this year? No, I won't be shocked at all. The thing with him, though, is he's got to avoid the concussion, the shoulder injury. He played 4 games and only started and finished 2 of those, so basically 2 full games. He's got to learn to slide, stop running into traffic when not necessary and all that. But just like I said with Lamar and Derrick Henry, these read options will be awesome with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, and they can feed off each other. Because once again, if you're a linebacker, when Anthony Richardson puts it in Jonathan Taylor's gut, is he going to pull it out of play action and run it himself, or is he going to actually hand it off to Jonathan Taylor? That's interesting. And that offense, like Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and they added A.D. Mitchell, and they still have Alec Pierce and Jelani Woods, who it sounds like a lot of steam right now for him to bounce back. So I'm really excited about Anthony Richardson. And what do we want in fantasy football? We want second-year breakouts, especially at quarterback. Check. We want very mobile quarterbacks. Well, he's as mobile as they come and built in a lab. He's just got to stop taking those hits. So, and then Jonathan Taylor, ADP RB5 right now. This is perfectly fine. Like, this is a fair ADP. I think RB5 or 6 is great for Jonathan Taylor. Like I mentioned, with all the read option stuff, I want Jonathan Taylor in my lineups every single week. Now, will he have 1,800 yards and 15 or 16 touchdowns like he did in that magical 2021 season in his second year in the league? No, but he could get to 1,200 and 10 or 11 touchdowns, especially with the added rushing mobility of Anthony Richardson. Absolutely, guys, I think he could. So his ADP is RB5 right now. Next, this is going deeper down the well here, if you will. Not too deep, but Raiders running back Zamir White. His ADP right now is RB22. Is a low-end RB24. That's probably a bit too low. I would have him ballparker on RB15 to 18. I think he could finish literally as a back at RB1, RB10 to 12, RB10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range. Because look at Zamir White. His pace was on pace in the 3 games, if you played that all season, for over 1,000 yards and like double-digit touchdowns. If you look at the pace metrics. And he was just flat out more explosive than Josh Jacobs last year. And he can kind of do everything, right? I know people are saying, well, what if this is another Alexander Madison situation where he comes in relief of Dalvin Cook the last few years before last year to an injury or he can't play or whatever. And Zamir White did that sometimes last year, especially the last 3 games, and they held Josh Jacobs out on IR. Or I don't know if he's technically on IR, but you know what I mean. They held him out. So I don't think this is another Alexander Madison situation. The thing with the Alexander Madison guy last year was he couldn't handle a full workload because he's not explosive, he's okay in pass protection, and he doesn't catch the ball. Zamir White is really good in pass protection. He's very, very explosive and athletic, and he catches the ball extremely well on the backfield. And he's also built like a tank and up. It's not Derrick Henry. I mean, no one is. But he put on a lot of muscle this offseason. So he knows. I think we could get 250 touches at minimum in the low end, and then the high end is like 300 to 320. Like, I think we could see a Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley-esque workload for this guy where they just run him into the ground literally and figuratively, because Antonio Pierce has been on record saying, I mean, hell, just the last week, just the other day, he said his 2 main goals in the game are to run the ball and control the clock. So that sounds like Zamir White to the moon to me. So I want Zamir. I think he can greatly outpace and outproduce this ADP of RB22. Next, moving along here. This is a really deep sleeper. I was talking about the really deep sleeper in the beginning that I'm really excited about, teasing this list. And I want Ladd McConkey. His ADP right now is WR45. He's going off the board as 45th wide receiver, as the wide receiver 45. It's criminal to me. I don't think he could finish as a wide receiver 1. But could he finish as a low-end wide receiver 2? Could he get to like 20 to 20, wide receiver 20 to 24 range at the end of the year? Yeah, because just the other day, I want to give this company outlet some love here, and I want to kind of give them credit for this. LA Times, that's who it was. LA Times just reported the other day that all signs are tracking leading to Ladd McConkey being wide receiver 1 for the Chargers. Because, let's see, Josh Palmer, Jag, he's just a guy. Quentin Johnson, he's not just a guy, but very tumultuous and disappointing rookie season. Last year, we all know how that went. And there's kind of some misnomers out there that Ladd McConkey can only line up in the slot. He's a slot merchant. No, his splits at Georgia, his whole Georgia career were like 70-30 in favor of outside. So if he's going to be wide receiver one, he's going to be moving all over the place. Outside, in the slot. Well, not in the backfield, but outside in the slot. Maybe give him some screens. Although that might not be his game either. So I want Ladd McConkey because who's throwing in the ball? I want the wide receiver one in a Justin freaking Herbert-led offense. Justin Herbert throwing in the ball. Now, I know what you're going to say. You guys are thinking right now, I've heard this argument before. Well, Greg Roman coming over from years of the offensive coordinator, the OC in Baltimore with the Ravens, and all they did was play defense and run the ball. Well, I think that was also by necessity because the Ravens kind of had Lamar Jackson, who's a scrambling quarterback, and they never had really the best wide receivers besides Mark Andrews, but he's a tight end, and Zay Flowers last year. So I'm really kind of going to I don't want to dispel and discredit that, but like, what if these running backs just aren't good enough? Like Gus Edwards, like, come on, he's just a guy, like waiver wire here and there, but you're never going to draft him. J.K. Dobbins, what can we even trust at this point? And then if he stays healthy, what can we trust at this point? Healthy or not? And then I'm really excited for Kamani Vidal. Day 3, 5th or 6th round. Day 3 pick out of Troy, deep sleeper too. But he's not a must-have because it's a three-way backfield. So what if those running backs just aren't good and Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh realize, okay, we have to pick up the pace a little. We can't be top 5 in the league in rushing because we just have Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Kamani Vidal. So Ladd McConkey, like, this might be a hot take, this might be a bold take or whatever, because he was a second-round receiver, not one of those premier first-round receivers like Xavier Legette, Xavier Worthy, Marvin Harrison Jr., Roman Dunze, Brian Thomas Jr. 7 wide receivers taken in the first round. 90 to 100 targets, maybe 100 to 120 even. I think Ladd McConkey is going to get peppered with targets. Quentin Johnston was drafted last year to be the Mike Williams successor now that he's gone. But Ladd McConkey was drafted this year after Keenan Allen was traded to the Bears for a 4th-round pick. Ladd McConkey is going to be their Keenan Allen. And I think he's more explosive and athletic than Keenan Allen because Keenan Allen never really lined up outside. The majority, if not all of his work, was taken in the slot on some bubble screens, on some wheel route. Not wheel routes, that's a running back on the backfield. Bubble screens, some slants. I think Ladd McConkey will get easy targets, but he can also get downfield and separate downfield. And coaches love guys that can just get open and separate downfield. Yeah, contested catches is great with Quentin Johnston, which is not the best at that either. But you guys how about just get open and you don't have to worry and stress out about contested catches. So Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 45, and I don't see this moving. Like, even the LA Times report the other day is it's tracking to be wide receiver 1, Ladd McConkey. I'm all in. So those are my reasons. I think Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman realize we can't keep running the ball with, once again, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Kamani Vidal. We got to spread it out a little. And Ladd McConkey is going to be that new Keenan Allen there who gets peppered with targets. So I'm very, very excited for him this year. Deep sleeper. But he shouldn't be that low. He's minus 45. Come on. Next, this is the other superstar besides Breece Hall. Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. His ADP is wide receiver 1. I'm telling you right now, he's 99. I'm 99% sure he's going to be my wide receiver 1 when I formally release my official rankings in the next couple weeks for fantasy football, 2024 fantasy football, I should say rather. The dude explodes. I don't know why the Cowboys haven't paid him yet, but he does everything. Extremely good route runner, can line up in the slot, line up and outside, get uncovered downfield, get open downfield. And who is he really competing with for targets? Yeah, Jake Ferguson, but that's a tight end. And the running backs, they're not going to run the ball out. They got Ezekiel Elliott, who hasn't been good in like 3 years here, people. And then they got Rico Dowdle, and that's it. And then he's fighting with quote-unquote, fighting with Brandon Cooks for targets, who's about to be 31 years old, who's like a wide receiver 4, and ideally in an offense, and they're miscasting him as a wide receiver 2 in Dallas with the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb, welcome to 150 targets, plus targets every single year going forward. I'm not afraid about his contract situation. It will get done. I can make the case. I probably won't do it myself, but I can make the case. This might be a fun topic. who outside of Christian McCaffrey could be the number 1 overall pick. I don't think it's Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, just because of the McCarthy-Darnold dynamics at QB over there in Minnesota with the Vikings for Justin Jefferson. If there's a wide receiver, I'm going with CeeDee Lamb at the 101, the first overall pick. I'm all in. He literally won me like 2 or 3 fantasy championships last year. The dude put up like almost 200, 150 to 200 yards week in and week out. He's a monster. We talk about Tyreek Hill breaking fantasy. I think CeeDee Lamb, like he's there, man. Guys as superstardom as they come. Next, Eagles running back Saquon Barkley. Now listen, his ADP is RB4. That's going ahead of Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry. Because after Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall / Bijan Robinson, you can debate RB2 and 3 between Hall and Robinson. That's neither here nor there. Whatever. Then you have Saquon Barkley, RB4. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys. If this price stays at RB4 and doesn't suppress to like RB9 or 10, 8, 9 to 10, 8, 9, or 10 off the board as low in RB1, because that's a locked and loaded mid to late first round pick, this is a tentative must have. What I mean by that is I don't know if this price doesn't suppress a little. I don't know if I'm taking a lot of shares of Saquon Barkley because I'll admit RB4 is a little too high, but I think he's going to have a huge bounce back. I know he didn't even hit 1,000 rushing yards last year, but those are the Giants. Who the hell is going to do good in that situation with that O-line and that coaching staff? And Daniel Jones / Tommy DeVito / Tyrod Taylor. But for the Eagles, I love Saquon on the Eagles this year, but not RB4 high because I know Jason Kelce is – sorry, get my list back on my phone. I know Jason Kelce retired, so will the tush push still be a thing? But you still got Jalen Hurts who can chuck it all over the place. But we'll know week 1 against the Packers in Brazil. They're on the 1-yard line. They're on the goal line. Do they line up in – does Jason Kelce – not shotgun. Does Jason Kelce line up on their center right behind the center? Who's going to be Cam Jurgens now and smash it with him? Or do they actually give Saquon the ball near the goal line? Because truth be told, touchdowns could still go to Jalen Hurts just in a different way. Maybe not the tush push, if you will, anymore. But Saquon Barkley, like I said, and I know Saquon Barkley at Penn State was a very dynamic receiving back. He hasn't been that since really his second year with the Giants in 2019. So for the past like 3 or 4 years, he hasn't been good in that game department, but everyone thinks he's going to be good. He's going to turn to being an elite pass catching running back out of the backfield, arguably the best in the NFL behind Christian McCaffrey. Return to form there. I don't know because Jalen Hurts is not a check down guy. When he scrambles and chucks it down the field to Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, AJ Brown especially, but he's not a check down guy. And we saw it last year. The Eagles have one of the lowest rates in every year over the last 3 or 4 years. In that span in the NFL of check down rate, low percentage. They had a very good pass catching running back with a very good pass catching chops and resume with DeAndre Swift last year, and they didn't check it down to him at all. So I don't think Saquon's going to return to that receiving form like people think. So RB4 right now in ADP, I'd like to see him or RB8 or 9 or 10 even. Maybe that's a tad too low. Maybe 8, RB7, 8 or 9, 7 to 9, somewhere in that range. If this doesn't suppress, I'm probably removing him from this must-have list, but that's just what I'm thinking right now. Next, moving on with the list here, another must-have. Commanders QB Jaden Daniels. His ADP right now is QB 17. That's a high middle tier QB too. But if Jaden Daniels finishes as QB like somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, I think 7's his absolute ceiling. I think his absolute floor basement is like somewhere in QB 12, 13, somewhere in that range. But we love Anthony Richardson for the rushing ability. And I don't see Jaden Daniels is even close to being built like Anthony Richardson is. Jaden Daniels, he's kind of got a skinny frame. He takes unnecessary hits. Like in college, you see him on 1st and 10 at his own side of the field, at midfield, somewhere around there. He's trying to leap over guys. Like, don't do that. Like, you're going to fumble the ball. You're going to get hurt. And the only thing is, do they want to kind of, this is the Lamar thing with the Ravens, do they want to kind of slam Jaden Daniels into the goal line at like 205 pounds, just like Lamar? I don't know. But, I mean, he's going to have to run a lot. He doesn't really wait for reads to develop. If the sorcery isn't there, he'll take off and scramble. And we love that for fantasy. Real life football, not a good strategy. But for fantasy football, absolutely. So if Jaden Daniels finishes somewhere in the low end QB1 range, maybe mid-tier QB1 range, 7, 8, 9, QB 7 to 9, somewhere in there, I'm all in on Jaden Daniels, guys. Like for redraft, Dynasty, absolutely, but for redraft, absolutely as well. Next, Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts. ADP is tight end 6 right now. That's perfectly fine with me. People might say it's too high because how many times are we going to buy into Kyle Pitts? This will be my third straight year drafting him in like the third or fourth round. And like, I don't know, guys. Like, I feel like him and Drake London and Bijan were all nuked, if you will, because of Arthur Smith and his dumb philosophies with, well, let's use Tyler Algier at the goal line. Well, let's give handoffs and checkdowns and end arounds to Johnny Smith and let him work in space because he's an athletic tight end. Well, let's give it to Matt Collins. Like, there's none of that anymore. Arthur Smith is gone. And if I'm looking, obviously Bijan, like, he should probably be on this list as well, although I don't. I'm a must-have. Kyle Pitts, like, I'm ready to be hurt again. If it doesn't work out this year, I'll admit, I'm like, hand up, I'm done. I'm out. Like, I'm just going to be done with Kyle Pitts if it doesn't work out after me drafting him fairly high in the third or fourth round for a third straight year. But let's not forget, like, Kyle Pitts, it's not like he's done nothing in his career. Even with Arthur Smith in his rookie year, he had 1,000 yards. First 1,000-yard tight end for a rookie. First rookie 1,000-yard tight end for a rookie tight end season since Mike Ditka, like years and years ago. What, 40, 50 years ago? I don't know. Maybe for me, obviously. But so he's not nothing. And you can move him around more. So Arthur Smith is gone. So I'm ready to be hurt again with Kyle Pitts, guys, but there's a reason I'm ready to be hurt again. I think this is it. And then Cardinals wide receiver. This is the second rookie wide receiver after Ladd McConkey. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s ADP is wide receiver 10. Listen, I think real life football, Kyler Murray is overrated. I don't love his passing metrics. But for fantasy football, he could break fantasy football. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide receiver 10. You might be thinking, whoa, Aiden, a low-end wide receiver 10 in terms of ADP and ECR, and in some cases even have him higher as well. What the heck? Should Malik Neighbors be higher because he's the only show in town in New York with the Giants? No, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. rightfully should be higher at wide receiver 10. Perfect scenario for him here. Who's he fighting for targets? Yeah, Michael Wilson is a good deep sleeper to buy in fantasy, but for redraft, not really. He's fighting with Trey McBride, and that's it. And I know those run James Conner on the ground literally and figuratively, but I'm going to love seeing them, Kyler Murray to MHJ, Marvin Harrison Jr. for short. Marvin Harrison Jr. connection. It's going to be awesome. And Jonathan Gannon, like, they were surprisingly, like, I know I only went through games last year, but they were surprisingly in, like, almost every game they played. But that's real-life football here. For fantasy, I'm really hitting on Marvin Harrison Jr. He only has to compete with Trey McBride truly for targets. And James Conner, I don't think he'll have to compete for targets with checkdowns because he's not really that much of a receiving back at all. So that was my second to last must-have, Marvin Harrison Jr. Next, my last must-have here, Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua. Puka juice, always Puka juice forever. ADP wide receiver 7. Absolutely. Now listen, people have kind of soured, Cooper Kupp is sour milk. Like, you don't go back in the fridge and get stale milk. If it's soured, it's soured. Like, throw it out. Like, if Cooper Kupp's going at extreme discount like he is right now, I'll draft him late, but I'm willing to pay the premium as a mid to late first round pick for Puka Nacua. Absolutely. His target share was through the moon last year. I mean, everyone keeps saying, who's the next Puka Nacua? But seriously, I don't think there's going to be a next fifth round pick out of a small school like BYU who breaks every single metric there is. Rookie receptions record broken by Puka. Rookie receiving yards record broken by Puka. Almost had the receiving. The reason he didn't have the receiving touchdowns record because once Cooper Kupp came back, he was kind of the red zone threat and the red zone guy. So this is really interesting. I'm willing to pay that premium on Puka. And I think Matthew Stafford can support 2 fantasy viable wide receivers, even if Cooper Kupp is further down the trough, if you will. But Cooper Kupp is further down. Puka, I'm in. Puka juice, always Puka juice, forever. Anyway, guys, that is the very first episode, inaugural episode of the Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show. We are part of the Around the Slice Podcast Network. You can find us on the Around the Slice YouTube channel or any audio platform right away, basically, after episodes. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. And if you want to support me on Patreon for just $3 a month, you get early access to my fantasy football rankings, weekly power rankings during the season, all stuff like that. Make sure to catch me on this show and the Run the Slice Bills show, the primary show. We talk about everything Buffalo Bills, training camp coming up. Anyways, guys, I love fantasy football. Next week, we might be talking. Well, I don't want to spoil that now. We'll get to that next week. But anyways, guys, fantasy football is becoming my passion, and I'm really looking forward to this project. And in season, we're going to ramp up with waiver wire advice, start sit advice, trade advice. If you have any questions, reach out to me in your Patreon, and you'll get my Patreon. And you'll get answered right away. Once again, that is patreon.com/aroundtheslice. Anyways, guys, I really appreciate if you rate, review, and subscribe and follow or whatever to this podcast, wherever you are. And yeah, wheels up from here. Those are my 14 must-have players for fans this year. I will see you on this show or the next show, whenever you see me next. But at least for the Around the Slice, this has been the first episode Around the Slice Fantasy Football Show. See you next week. Bye.